lot of investors think if you have enough cash for the down payment, the lender's going to easily approve your file. But really, there's more layers to it than that. There's going to be factors like where the money came from, how many months of reserves you need after you close on the house, and there's even multiple factors that dictate how big of a down payment is needed for a DSCR loan. We're going to dig into all these components in this video so you're never going to be caught off guard. There's really 3 tiers of down payments that are needed for a DSCR loan. 15% is always the bare minimum. And keep in mind, most properties are not going to qualify for a 15% down because they're not going to have a 1 DSCR ratio. Again, with a DSCR loan, the rent always has to cover the full mortgage payment after taxes, insurance, and if HOA is applied. So most properties are not going to qualify, so you would have to pivot to 20% down, assuming you don't have enough rental income for 15% down. 20% down seems to be the most common approach. That's what most investors that I've worked with in the past typically put down, 20% down. Keep in mind, 15% down can be a great option. There's not going to be any PMI involved. 20% down, there's going to be less anxiety about getting that 1 DSCR ratio because you're going to have a bigger down payment. 25% can often be applied if you have concerns about rental income, getting that 1 DSCR ratio. If that property is unique, if there's not a lot of comps, if you have a lower credit, those would be reasons you'd have to put down 25% of the purchase price for a DSCR loan. On top of the down payment, you're still going to have to bring in the closing costs. I'm going to generalize here just to give you an idea of how much closing costs are nationwide. Typically between $6,000 to $10,000 would be like your average range of closing costs. I've done some loans where I had $10,000 in closing costs for just property taxes. So this is going to vary region to region, but on average, let's call it $8,000 for standard closing costs. What you can do as an investor, you can always ask for up to a 2 to 6%, varies by the lender and loan option, seller concession or seller credit to cover these closing costs. I've done so many loans recently where my investor only brought in the down payment and had the closing cost fully covered by the seller. So down payment, that's going to be the minimum amount of money you need. There are going to be closing costs. If you can bake that into the cake, get a seller credit or a seller concession, then of course you're not going to have to worry about closing costs. So what you can do as an investor, if you do not have the cash yourself, you can still exercise the option of getting a gift from a family or friend to help cover that down payment. What you can do is just put money under your mattress and deposit it into the bank. The money does have to be verified like any other loan. So if you have a $400,000 loan, they see a $10,000 deposit, they're going to want to know where that money came from. Did it come from your business, work? Is this just a cash deposit? Lenders all have their own overlays and rules for what that threshold is to be considered a large deposit. But typically, money does have to be verified with a 60-day transaction log. If you're short, you can exercise that option of getting a gift or getting a seller concession to at least cover the closing costs, so you're mainly worried about the actual down payment. In terms of verifying funds to close, the lender's always going to ask for 2 months worth of bank statements to verify funds. So all the money that's going to be used for either down payment or closing costs, this money always has to be verified with a 60-day bank transaction statement or 2 months worth of statements. If you have a big, large deposit, maybe some cash that was just deposited into your bank, your lender's probably not going to allow you to use these funds. The lender always is going to verify where those funds came from to make sure it's not an unsourced large deposit, which is money that you'd be unable to use on a transaction. Nowadays, it's become a lot easier to use gift funds for loans than it was years before in the past. So of course, gift funds can be money from a family member or a friend that's going to contribute towards the down payment. And years back, lenders had very strict rules against using gift funds. In 2026, it's never been easier to use gift funds. So if you're a little bit short of that 15, 20, 25% down payment, getting a gift can be a great way to come up with the verified funds needed to get final loan approval. Here's a breakdown of how much funds you're actually going to need for a DSCR loan. Let's assume a purchase price of $400,000. Let's assume, of course, down payment alone is going to be $80,000. The next component there is going to be closing costs. So you can either wipe out the closing costs, negotiate the seller to cover all of that. If not, you would add an additional $8,000 if you had to come out of pocket for the closing cost. So with just down payment and closing costs, you're looking at right around $88,000. The next component there is going to be reserve funds. So let's say 1 month worth of reserves is going to be 1 month worth of mortgage payments, which we're estimating here at $2,500. So 3 months reserves is typically the minimum. You're looking at around $7,500 we'd have to add to the grand total for the cash to close. So with closing costs and reserves, we're looking at right around $95,000, $500. Again, if you're able to get the seller to cover the closing cost, then you're going to be bringing in just the down payment plus the needed reserves. Again, the exact amount needed for a DSCR loan is going to vary on so many factors, like if you're going to get a seller credit, is this property going to cash flow at 15% down, or would you have to bring in 20 or 25% down? There's multiple factors that go in. If you need help running comps on a property to determine the exact amount needed for that particular property, drop me a comment, shoot me a message. Again, my name is Clarence. Look forward to connecting.